In 2008, one company controlled 54% of every smartphone sold on Earth. Not Apple, not Samsung, Nokia. And within 7 years, it was gone. This is the complete history of global smartphone shipments from 2008 to 2024 in numbers. Nokia shipped 61 million smartphones in 2008. That was more than Apple, Samsung, and BlackBerry combined. The crown was theirs, and it felt permanent. Watch what happens when you run the numbers year by year. In 2008, Nokia leads with 61 million units. BlackBerry is in second at 24 million. Apple just launched the App Store and sits at 11.6 million. Samsung is barely on the board. Then 2011 hits. The Samsung Galaxy S2 launches. In a single year, Samsung goes from 25 million units to 95 million, nearly quadrupling. Nokia goes the other direction, dropping from 100 million to 77 million. By 2012, Samsung is shipping 213 million units and holds 47% of the global market. Nokia is at 35 million and falling. BlackBerry, once a genuine rival, is hemorrhaging share every quarter. By 2013, Samsung reaches its all-time peak, 314 million smartphones in a single year. Nokia ships 30 million. The company that once owned this market is now a rounding error. Nokia sold its entire mobile phone division to Microsoft in 2013. The company that built the modern smartphone market walked away from it completely. That 2013 number for Samsung, 314 million units, is worth sitting with for a moment. To put it in context, that is more than one smartphone shipped for every single person in the United States in 1 year. Samsung had built the most dominant position any single vendor had ever held in this industry. Their nearest competitor, Apple, was at 150 million, less than half. The gap looked insurmountable. It wasn't. Now watch the middle of the decade. Two things are happening at once. At the top, Samsung's grip slowly loosens. From 318 million in 2015 to 292 million by 2018, Apple stays patient, never chasing volume, hovering between 169 and 231 million. But the real action is in the middle of the chart. Chinese brands are exploding. Huawei goes from 75 million in 2014 to 153 million in 2017, doubling in 3 years. Xiaomi appears almost from nowhere, 0 shipments before 2012, then 60 million in 2014, then 90 million by 2017. Oppo and Vivo arrived together and each cross 100 million units by 2017. The top of the chart has 2 brands. The rest of the chart has been completely replaced. By 2019, Huawei ships 240 million units, its personal all-time record, and climbs to number 2 globally, just behind Samsung, at 295 million. Apple slips to third. A Chinese company is one step from the top of the world. In May 2019, the US government placed Huawei on the Entity List. That cut off access to Google services, American chips, and key software partners. The effects hit the data almost immediately. This is one of the most dramatic data moves in this entire dataset. Huawei ships 240 million units in 2019. 1 year later, in 2020, that number falls to 189 million as the sanctions bite and consumers lose confidence. Then 2021 arrives, and Huawei crashes to 35 million units. That is an 85% collapse in 2 years. A company that was weeks away from being the number 1 smartphone vendor in the world is now shipping fewer phones than it did in 2011. Xiaomi, Oppo, and Vivo absorb the vacuum almost instantly. Xiaomi alone jumps from 145 million in 2020 to 191 million in 2021. The analysts called it openly. Xiaomi inherited Huawei's market share. The final stretch of the chart tells a story of stabilization, with one last surprise. Samsung holds number 1 through 2022 with 260 million units. Apple holds steady around 226 to 235 million. Xiaomi, Oppo, and Vivo settle into the 95 to 168 million range. Huawei lingers between 28 and 45 million, a ghost of its former self. Then 2023 happens. Apple ships 234.6 million units. Samsung ships 226 million. For the first time in the history of this dataset, going back to 2008, Apple is the number one smartphone vendor on Earth. They had been number 2 behind Samsung for over a decade. Then quietly, without a splashy product launch or a pricing war, they just outshipped everyone. In 2024, Apple holds the lead again at 232 million units. Apple never chased market share. They held price, held margin, and waited. 15 years after entering the smartphone market at number 4, they reached number 1. Pull back and look at market share over the full 16 years. Nokia goes from 54% to 0, Xiaomi, the steepest decline in the dataset. BlackBerry goes from 21% to 0 in 6 years. Samsung peaks at 53% in 2013 and lands at 25% in 2024. Huawei peaks at 22% in 2019 and sits at 5% today. Apple starts at 10%, barely moves for years, then climbs steadily to 27% by 2024. The Chinese brands, Xiaomi, Oppo, Vivo, each carve out a stable 10 to 19% slice and hold it. The market didn't just shuffle positions, it completely replaced half its players. 3 companies in this dataset, Nokia, BlackBerry, and Huawei, each held more than 20% of the global smartphone market at their peaks. All 3 lost it. One to complacency, one to culture, one to geopolitics. The market didn't care about legacy. It never does. All data comes from IDC, Canalys, Gartner, and primary investor filings from Apple, Samsung, Xiaomi, and Huawei. Links are in the description. If you want to see the same treatment done for another industry, leave it in the comments.